I found one relevant file that contains detailed information for your request. Would you like me to extract and use that for creating the story topic line? It started with something small, but it quickly spiraled into the biggest nightmare of my life. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, trying to piece together a life shattered by betrayal, but here I am. My wife seemed perfect at first, beautiful, smart, the kind of woman everyone admired. We had a good life, or so I thought. We had money, a nice house, and two kids we loved more than anything. But then little things began to change. At first I brushed it off. She was busy with work, stressed out, or so she said. But I started noticing her phone more often, hiding it when I entered the room, texting late at night when she thought I wasn't looking. And then came the weirdest thing. A few weeks ago, I caught her in a lie. I asked her about a dinner she said she had with her sister, but her phone pinged with a message from some guy named Jake, and she quickly shut it down, saying, "It was just a work thing." That wasn't the first time I saw her act secretive. She started wearing new perfume, coming home later than usual, and her attitude got bitchy. She snapped at me over nothing, and her eyes had this strange, guilty look sometimes. I told myself I was paranoid, overthinking it, but deep inside I knew something was wrong. Then last week I found her phone on the kitchen table unlocked. I saw the messages, flirty, suggestive, and downright disgusting. There were pictures of her in lingerie, messages about missing him, and plans to meet up. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I loved and trusted, was cheating on me. The worst part, she lied about everything, even when I confronted her. She said I was crazy, that I was imagining things. But I knew better. I saw her sneaking out one night, looking over her shoulder, and I followed her. That's when I saw her getting into a car with Jake, the guy from her texts. They went to a hotel. I watched from a distance, my heart pounding. I felt numb, furious, and betrayed all at once. I couldn't believe she'd do this to me after everything we built. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the way she lied, the way she made me feel like I was losing my mind. I never thought would be capable of this kind of betrayal. I thought I knew her. I thought we had honesty and trust. But now I realize I was blind. She had been lying to my face for months, maybe longer. I didn't know what to do at first. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, but I was frozen. I needed time to think, to process what I'd seen. But I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. This wasn't just about the affair. It was about the lies, the money, and the way she manipulated me. She's always been good at lying, covering her tracks, making me believe I was crazy. But I was. I saw enough to know that this was the end of the line. I had to decide if I was going to fight for my marriage or walk away. One thing was clear: she wasn't the woman I thought she was, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not without a fight. I started planning, quietly gathering evidence, thinking about how I'd expose her. I wanted her to pay for what she did, not just for the cheating, but for the years of lies and manipulation. I'd been naive, trusting her blindly, and now I was paying the price. I couldn't believe how quickly my world turned upside down. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by this stranger who lied and cheated behind my back. It hurt more than I can put into words. After I saw her with Jake that night, everything changed. I couldn't unsee what I had witnessed, and I couldn't pretend I didn't know. But I also knew I couldn't confront her blindly or lash out without a plan. That's when I decided I had to be smart about this. I started by digging into her phone, her emails, her social media. I needed hard evidence, something concrete I could use if I decided to confront her or take legal action. I knew she'd lie her way out of it if I just asked her outright, so I had to be prepared. Over the next few days, I became a detective. I found emails from Jake, full of flirtatious messages and even some photos she'd sent him. She'd even started a secret bank account, I discovered, where she was funneling money to pay for her hotel stays and gifts for him. I was stunned. She'd been hiding so much. I also found out she'd been taking cash out of our joint account, small amounts at first, then larger sums. All the signs pointed to her planning this affair for a while. I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak. How could she do this to us? Meanwhile, she kept up her act at home. She'd come home late, act innocent, well, as innocent as she could when I knew everything. She'd lie about where she was, say she was out with friends or working late. I could see the guilt in her eyes sometimes, but she'd quickly cover it up with bitchy comments or dismissive attitude. It was like she was trying to gaslight me into doubting my own senses. I started questioning myself. Was I overreacting? Was I losing my mind? But I had the evidence now. It was undeniable. Then came the moment I decided I needed to confront her. I waited until she was in a bad mood, deliberately provoking her. I brought up her secret phone, her lies about her whereabouts, and her shady money moves. Her reaction was classic. She got defensive, yelled at me, called me paranoid, accused me of spying on her. She even threw in that she was just stressed and needed a break. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I knew everything about Jake, the hotel, the money, and her face lost all her usual bitchy bravado. She looked genuinely panicked for a split second before regaining her composure. Her reaction hit me hard. She started crying, but not because she was sorry. No, it was more like she was angry that I caught her. She kept insisting she was justified, that she was stressed out, that she only cheated because I wasn't paying enough attention to her. She said I was boring, that she deserved better. It was all lies, spun so fast I couldn't keep up. I saw right through her. She's always been a master at twisting things, making herself the victim. But this time, I saw her for what she really was: selfish, manipulative, and completely unfaithful. The emotional impact hit me like a freight train. I felt shock, then rage, then deep sadness. I loved her, or at least I thought I did. Now I wasn't sure I knew her at all. I kept replaying everything: how she lied about her schedule, how she dismissed my concerns, how she looked at Jake with that strange, hungry look. It hurt so much to realize I had been blind for so long. And I was angry at myself for trusting her so blindly, for thinking our life was perfect when it was just a house of cards waiting to fall. In the days that followed, I went through every possible emotion. I was furious, furious enough to want to ruin her, to expose her to everyone she cared about. But I also felt betrayed and heartbroken, like I'd lost the person I loved most in the world. I started questioning everything: our marriage, my worth, whether I'd ever be able to forgive her or myself. I knew I had to decide what I wanted to do next. Part of me wanted to burn everything down to make her pay for what she did. But another part, quieter and more rational, told me I needed to think carefully about my next move. I realized I couldn't keep living like this, walking on eggshells, pretending everything was okay. I decided I'd gather more evidence, plan my next step, and prepare myself for whatever came next. I knew I couldn't stay silent forever. If I was going to take revenge or even consider saving what was left of our marriage, I had to be strategic. I had to make her feel the consequences of her actions, not just through words but through actions she couldn't deny. That's where I was right now, standing at the crossroads, trying to figure out how to turn this nightmare into something I could survive. In the days that followed my confrontation, I felt like I was walking through a fog. Every time I saw her face would flash in my mind: her lies, her sneers, the way she looked at Jake that night. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat much. All I could think about was how she'd betrayed me, how she'd broken the trust we built over years. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I let her manipulate me for so long. The worst part was knowing she'd been lying to everyone: her friends, her family, even the kids. That realization made me sick. I decided I needed a plan, a way to get back at her, to make her feel the weight of what she'd done, but I wasn't going to do anything rash. I spent the next couple of days secretly recording her, gathering more evidence, and even installing a hidden camera in the bedroom. I wanted to catch her in the act if she slipped up again or if she tried to lie her way out of it. I knew her too well. She'd deny everything until the bitter end, so I had to be ready. Meanwhile, I also started looking into her financials more deeply. I hired a private investigator to dig into her bank accounts, her phone records, her social media activity. I wanted to know exactly how much she'd spent, who else she might be talking to, and whether she'd been planning this for a while. It turned out she'd been funneling money into secret accounts, paying for hotel stays, dinners, and gifts for Jake. It was a mess. I found receipts for jewelry, expensive dinners, even a brand new designer purse she claimed she needed for work. All paid for with money she'd hidden from me. She'd been living a double life and I felt like I'd been punched again. Only this time it was about her greed and selfishness. One night I caught her texting Jake again. She was on her phone late and I saw the message pop up, "Can't wait to see you tonight." That was it. I snapped a screenshot and decided I'd had enough. I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine, not anymore. I also started talking to an attorney. I wanted to know my rights, how to protect myself and the kids, and what kind of legal action I could take if I decided to divorce her. Honestly, I was leaning toward ending things, but I needed to be sure I was prepared. I also made a point to observe her interactions with the kids. She was still acting like she loved them, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She'd get irritated when they asked questions about where she was or who she was with. She'd snap at them or dismiss their concerns. It made me realize how much damage she'd already done to our family. I started documenting everything: her mood swings, her lies, her secretive behavior. I knew I'd need all this evidence if I decided to go through with a divorce or if I had to fight for custody. At the same time, I was battling my own emotions. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to make her feel guilty, to ruin her reputation. But another part was just exhausted, emotionally drained and numb. I kept thinking about the good times, the plans we'd made, the future we once talked about. How could she throw it all away for some fleeting sex with Jake? It made me sick to my stomach. I also felt a strange sense of clarity, like I was finally seeing her for who she really was. The mask had fallen, and all that was left was this cold, selfish woman who only cared about herself. I knew I had to decide soon. I could confront her again, maybe show her the evidence I'd collected, or I could wait and see what she did next. I was leaning toward the latter. I wanted her to feel like I was always one step ahead, that I knew everything and was prepared to take action. I also knew I had to protect the kids from the fallout, so I started thinking about how to handle that carefully. I didn't want to hurt them or make them feel like they had to choose sides. The most surprising thing I learned in all this was how much I underestimated her. I always thought was clever, but I also thought she loved me and us. Turns out she was good at hiding her true self. She was selfish, manipulative, and willing to risk everything for a quick thrill. I felt betrayed not just by her infidelity but by her lies, her deception, her total disregard for the vows we took. I was angry, yes, but I was also hurt. Deep down, I knew this was more than just an affair. It was a betrayal of everything we once shared. And now, I was trying to figure out what to do with that knowledge, how to move forward from this chaos she created. The more I dug into her financials, the more I realized how deep her deception went. She'd been funneling money into accounts I didn't even know existed, accounts she probably thought I'd never find. I found receipts for luxury hotels, designer clothes, even online subscriptions for special services. It was clear she was spending money to keep her affair alive, to indulge her selfish needs without a second thought. The realization made my blood boil. I'd been working my ass off to provide for her and the kids, and meanwhile, she was throwing it all away on Jake. I decided I had enough evidence to confront her again, but this time I planned to do it differently. I didn't want her to spin her usual lies or gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. I wanted her cornered with no way out. So I prepared a detailed dossier, screenshots of texts, bank statements, hotel receipts, photos she'd taken with Jake, everything. I knew I could use it as leverage if I decided to file for divorce or take legal action. I also set up a meeting with my lawyer. I wanted to know what my options were: custody, finances, how to protect myself from her manipulations. Meanwhile, I kept observing her. She was trying to act normal, but I could tell she was getting anxious. She'd snap at the kids more often, raise her voice over small things, and her mood swings were becoming more obvious. I caught her in a few lies, too, small ones at first, but then bigger ones, like denying she'd been to the hotel or that she'd even met Jake. Her face would turn red and she'd get defensive, but I had the proof now. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and disgust. She thought she was so clever, hiding everything, but I was always one step ahead. One night I decided it was time to push her further. I left the evidence on her laptop and some printed copies on the kitchen table. I wanted her to see I knew everything. I didn't confront her directly yet. I wanted her to realize I was serious, that I had all her secrets. I watched her from a distance as she discovered the files. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. She started yelling, accusing me of spying, of invading her privacy. She called me paranoid, crazy even. That's when I saw her true colors. She was panicked, desperate, trying to cover her tracks. Her reaction made me question whether I should even give her a chance to explain. Honestly, I was past that point. I'd already made up my mind that I'd had enough of her lies and manipulation. She kept insisting she was innocent, that I was overreacting, but her words sounded hollow. I knew better. I knew she'd been cheating on me for months. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity, like I was finally seeing her for who she really was. I'd been blind for so long, trusting her blindly, and now I was paying the price. I started thinking about my next move. I knew I had to act fast if I wanted to protect myself and the kids. I couldn't let her spin her web of lies any longer. I needed to get ahead of her, to show her I was serious about ending this. I contacted a divorce attorney that same night. We talked about the best way to proceed, custody, division of assets, and how to handle her attempts to manipulate the situation. I knew she'd try to make me look like the bad guy, but I was ready. I had the evidence, I had the plan, and I was determined to come out of this stronger. The hardest part was facing the reality that our marriage was over. Deep down, I still loved her, or at least I thought I did. But love isn't enough when betrayal cuts so deep. I realized I had wasted so much time trusting her, believing her lies, convincing myself everything was fine. Now, I had to accept that I was better off without her, even if it hurt like hell. I also started thinking about the future, what kind of life I wanted to rebuild, how to keep the kids safe and stable, and how to get through the pain of losing the woman I once thought was mine. It was a long road ahead, but I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic cycle. I had to take control before she managed to manipulate me even further. Over the next few days, I started putting my plan into motion. I met with the lawyer again, got all my ducks in a row. I wanted to file for divorce, but I also knew I had to be careful. Was unpredictable when she got cornered. She was the kind of person who'd spin stories, manipulate the truth, and try to turn everyone against me. I couldn't let her do that. So I kept everything factual, organized, and discreet. I also decided I needed to do something about her financial deception. I hired a private investigator to dig into her accounts more thoroughly. Turns out she'd been secretly withdrawing money for months, not just to pay for her affair, but also to buy herself some kind of safety net. I found out she had a stash of cash hidden in a safe in her closet, enough to run away if she wanted. She'd been planning her escape, I think, or at least preparing for the worst. That realization made me even more determined to act quickly. One evening, I sat her down and showed her all the evidence I'd gathered. I told her I knew about her affair, the secret accounts, her lies, everything. Her reaction was classic. She went from angry to defensive, then to tears, then back to contempt. She told me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I was ruining her life. She even had the nerve to say she loved me and the kids, that she was just stressed, that she needed a break. I just looked at her and said, "It's too late for excuses, I'm done." I didn't yell or lose my temper. I knew that wouldn't help. I just laid out what was coming next. I told her I was filing for divorce, that I'd be taking full custody of the kids, and that I was going to make sure she couldn't manipulate the situation anymore. I handed her a copy of the evidence, watching her face twist with anger and fear. That was the first time I saw her truly scared. She knew I was serious, and she knew her entire world was about to fall apart. She begged me not to do it, said she'd change, promised she'd stop seeing Jake. But I knew better. I'd heard enough lies. The next step was preparing for the fallout. I contacted my bank, changed all the passwords, and froze her access to our joint accounts. I also arranged for a divorce mediator and started the legal process. I knew she'd fight me tooth and nail. She was the queen of manipulation, after all. But I was ready. I wanted to make sure I protected myself, the kids, and my financial future. I also made arrangements to keep the kids away from her for a while to give everyone some space to breathe. In the meantime, behavior grew more erratic. She was trying to guilt-trip me, crying, saying I was ruining her life, accusing me of destroying her family. But inside, I knew the truth. She was the one who destroyed it. I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. I was finally taking control of the situation, but I also felt the ache of losing someone I once loved. I kept reminding myself that I deserved better, that I shouldn't stay in a marriage built on lies and betrayal. I also started to think about what I'd tell the kids. They were young, innocent, and I didn't want them to grow up thinking their mother was a liar or a cheat. I planned to be honest with them in an age-appropriate way, explaining that sometimes adults make mistakes and that it's okay to feel upset. I wanted to shield them from the worst of it, but I knew they'd pick up on the tension. It tore me apart to see their confused faces, but I promised myself I'd do everything I could to keep them safe and cared for. So here I was, on the verge of ending my marriage, with a mountain of evidence and a plan in place. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I knew I couldn't keep living in this lie. This betrayal had opened my eyes to who she really was, a selfish, manipulative woman who'd rather chase her own pleasure than hold onto her family. As much as it hurt, I was finally ready to take control and rebuild my life. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew I'd come out stronger, and I'd make damn sure she paid for what she'd done. The day I finally filed for divorce felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders, even though I knew it was just the beginning of a long, painful process. I handed over everything, evidence, legal paperwork, my intentions, and prepared myself for whatever chaos she'd throw my way. His reaction was as expected. She went ballistic. She screamed, called me every name under the sun, and accused me of ruining her life, but I stayed calm. I knew her well enough now to see through her manipulations. I had done my homework, gathered everything, and was ready to stand my ground. In the weeks that followed, she tried every trick in the book to turn the tables. She contacted friends and family, spinning stories about how I was controlling and paranoid. She even tried to make herself look like the victim, claiming I was abusive or crazy. But I had the evidence, and I kept it all close. The court proceedings were tough. She fought me on every custody decision, trying to paint me as an unfit father, but I had enough proof of her lies and manipulations to counter her claims. I made sure the court knew everything: her affair, her financial deception, her reckless spending, and her secret plans. Meanwhile, I focused on the kids. I wanted to shield them from the worst of the mess, but I also knew they needed to see that I was there for them, that I was stable and safe. I spent quality time with them, making sure they felt loved and protected. I kept their routines as normal as possible, and I avoided speaking badly about in front of them. I wanted them to know that, no matter what, I was their dad and I was going to do everything I could to give them a good life. The hardest part was watching her try to manipulate the situation, to turn everyone against me. She spread rumors, played the victim, and even tried to hide her new relationship with Jake. But I kept my head. I had my evidence, my lawyer, and my resolve. I knew she'd never change. Her selfishness was baked into her, and I didn't want her back even if she begged. I realized that I'd been holding on to hope for too long, hoping she'd come around or change. But she hadn't. She was who she was, and I had to accept that I couldn't fix her. Eventually, the court granted the divorce, and I was awarded primary custody of the kids. Got limited visitation, which she tried to manipulate with emotional appeals, but I was firm. I wanted to make sure my children were safe, shielded from her lies, and raised in a healthy environment. It wasn't an easy process, but I knew it was necessary. I also managed to get a fair division of assets, though I didn't care much about material things anymore. What mattered was that I was free from her control, free from her lies, and finally able to breathe again. Looking back, I realize how much I learned from all of this. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can come from the people you least expect. It's painful to see someone you love turn into a stranger, but sometimes walking away is the only way to save yourself. I've come to accept that I did everything I could and that I deserve better. I've started rebuilding my life, focused on my kids, my work, and my own happiness. I know now that I don't need someone who lies, cheats, and manipulates to feel complete. To anyone out there going through something similar, I can only say this: trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and don't be afraid to walk away if it's the right thing. Love and loyalty are earned, not given blindly. And sometimes, the greatest act of strength is letting go of someone who no longer values you. I've learned that the hard way, but I'm finally at peace. My life is perfect, but it's mine again, cleaned of lies, filled with hope, and ready for whatever comes next.